They treated her backyard like a resort, so she gave them an unforgettable vacation. Maya Chen stood in her yard at dawn, staring at the evidence. Trampled flower beds, empty chip bags floating in her koi pond, and beer bottles scattered around her custom fire pit. Again, these people had crossed the line for the last time. At 35, Maya had turned this ordinary suburban plot into a paradise that made neighbors stop and stare. Not because she inherited wealth, not because she married into it, but because she'd poured every drop of her landscape architect expertise and savings into creating something extraordinary. Now the new neighbors were treating her sanctuary like their personal playground. They had no idea what they'd just started. As we dive into this story, let us know where you're watching from in the comments. Maya Chen cherished her backyard oasis more than anything. After spending years hunched over design tables for wealthy clients, she'd finally created her own masterpiece. The koi pond, its surface shimmering with morning light. The gazebo, positioned perfectly to catch both sunrise and sunset. The fire pit area, surrounded by custom stonework she'd installed herself, piece by painstaking piece. Every plant, every stone, every design element represented a piece of her soul, her sanctuary from a world that demanded too much. Working from home meant Maya spent most of her days in her garden office, the gentle splashing of the waterfall backdrop to client Zoom calls. "Your background is amazing," they'd exclaim. "Is that really your yard?" Yes, it was. All hers. Every square inch designed, planted, and maintained by her hands. Until the Hendersons moved in next door. The Hendersons arrived 6 weeks ago, Craig, Lisa, and their teenage twins, Zach and Allie. From day one, they'd been loud, boundary-pushing, and oddly entitled. Their constant compliments about Maya's yard felt less like admiration and more like assessment. "Your yard is absolutely gorgeous," Lisa had gushed during their first introduction, peering around Maya's shoulder at the landscape beyond. "Like something out of a resort brochure." "Thank you," Maya had replied, not catching the hungry look in Lisa's eyes. "It's been my passion project for years. We should definitely have you over for a barbecue sometime." Craig had added, though his gaze never left the custom fire pit area visible through Maya's side gate. The first invasion happened on a Tuesday. Maya had gone to meet a client, returning to find wet footprints across her patio stones. The next day she discovered candy wrappers floating in her koi pond. By week 3, someone had clearly been lounging in her gazebo. Cushions rearranged, a forgotten phone charger tucked between seat cushions. Maya installed security cameras the following weekend, positioning them discreetly among her Japanese maples. What she captured left her speechless, the entire Henderson family treating her yard like an extension of their property. Lisa sunbathing on Maya's custom loungers. Craig firing up Maya's grill without permission. The teenagers and their friends cannonballing into the koi pond, sending her precious fish darting for cover. The invasion began in earnest one sunny Thursday afternoon. Maya had just wrapped up a video call with an important client when her phone buzzed with a security alert. She glanced at the screen and froze. There, in her backyard, was Lisa Henderson, stretched out on Maya's custom lounger, wearing nothing but a bikini and sunglasses, sipping what appeared to be one of Maya's sparkling waters from the outdoor mini-fridge. Maya watched in disbelief as the footage continued. Craig Henderson strolled into frame, casually firing up Maya's expensive grill as if he owned it. Minutes later, their teenage twins and 3 friends arrived through the gap in the back fence, immediately heading for the koi pond. Maya's heart raced as one boy removed his shoes and dangled his feet in the water she'd spent hours maintaining at the perfect pH balance for her sensitive fish. What followed was a full-blown backyard party, in her yard. They used her outdoor speakers, helping themselves to the Bluetooth connection. They opened her storage chest, pulling out her custom cushions and throws. One teenager even found Maya's hidden spare key to the gazebo, where they proceeded to take selfies and TikTok videos captioned, "Best secret spot ever." 3 hours. They stayed for 3 hours, leaving only when rain clouds gathered overhead, and they didn't clean up, not one bit. Empty chip bags floated in her koi pond. Wet towels hung over her rare Japanese maple. Someone had knocked over and broken one of her handcrafted solar lanterns. The next day, determined to end this madness, Maya marched next door. Lisa Henderson answered, her smile faltering slightly at Maya's expression. "May I help you?" she asked, as if they were strangers. "You were in my backyard yesterday," Maya stated flatly. "All of you, for hours." Lisa's friendly facade slipped for just a moment before she recovered. "Oh, I think there must be some misunderstanding. We would never." Maya held up her phone, security footage playing clearly. "This isn't a misunderstanding. This is trespassing." The shock on Lisa's face might have been satisfying if it wasn't so quickly replaced by dismissive entitlement. "Well," Lisa said with an awkward laugh, "we didn't think you'd mind. You work inside all day. It's not like you were using it." The audacity stole Maya's breath. "Not using it? It's my property. Whether I'm actively sitting in it or not doesn't give you permission to." Craig appeared behind his wife. "Look, no harm done, right? The kids just needed somewhere to hang out. Your yard is nicer than anyone else's in the neighborhood. We figured since you're single with no kids, you wouldn't miss sharing a little outdoor space." Maya stared at them. "Sharing implies consent. You didn't ask. You trespassed." "That's a pretty harsh word," Craig frowned. "We're neighbors. Neighbors share things." "Not without asking, they don't," Maya insisted. "Please stay out of my yard unless invited." Lisa's smile turned brittle. "Of course, sorry for the misunderstanding." Maya knew as she walked away that nothing had been resolved. The Hendersons hadn't agreed to stop. They'd merely been caught, and their hollow apology contained no real acknowledgement of wrongdoing. The very next weekend proved her right. She returned from a nursery run to find all the evidence of another visit, though this time they'd been more careful. Cushions returned, almost to their original positions. Trash removed. But the security cameras caught it all. The Hendersons had simply waited until her car left the driveway before invading again, this time with 5 additional friends. The intrusions escalated. Maya began finding her space invaded almost daily, each time returning to discover something new, disturbed, or damaged. Her concentration suffered. Client calls became stressful. What would she return to find afterwards? Her sanctuary had become a source of anxiety. That evening, as Maya surveyed the damage to her garden, her phone rang. "Hey Maya, we still on for dinner tomorrow?" It was Ben Crawford, her closest friend from landscape architecture school. Where Maya had built her career designing private gardens, Ben had taken his design talents in a different direction, creating elaborate themed environments for high-end events and corporate retreats. His specialty was transforming ordinary spaces into immersive experiences. "Ben," Maya's voice cracked slightly, "I might need to rain check. I'm dealing with an invasion." Over the next 20 minutes, Maya poured out the whole frustrating saga. The Hendersons' entitlement, the repeated trespassing, the dismissive attitudes when confronted. "That's beyond ridiculous," Ben said when she finished. "Have you thought about calling the police?" "For what? They'll say it's a civil matter, tell me to build a better fence." "Then maybe," Ben said, his voice taking on the tone Maya recognized from their college days when he was about to suggest something outrageous. "What you need isn't official intervention. What you need is a lesson they'll never forget." "What are you thinking?" Maya asked, intrigued despite her exhaustion. "These people are treating your backyard like their personal resort, right? So give them the full resort experience, just not the one they're expecting." "I help create themed environments for a living, Maya. Let me help you create one that teaches boundaries." For the first time in weeks, Maya felt a spark of something other than frustration. "Tell me more." The planning began that night. Ben came over with his laptop and Operation Resort rules took shape. Maya would pretend to go away for the weekend. Ben would help rig her yard with a series of harmless but increasingly mortifying consequences for the inevitable trespassers. "The key," Ben explained as they sketched out the plan, "is escalation. Start small, give them chances to leave, and if they persist, well, that's on them." By the time Ben left that night, Maya felt something she hadn't felt since the Hendersons moved in, a sense of control. She wasn't just going to be victimized anymore. She was going to reclaim her space. The next few days were spent preparing. Ben brought over equipment, helping Maya set up everything they needed while keeping it all perfectly concealed. When Friday arrived, Maya made a show of loading her car with a weekend bag, making sure Lisa Henderson spotted her. "Going somewhere nice?" Lisa called out with poorly disguised interest. "Visiting my sister for the weekend," Maya replied, noting how Lisa's eyes lit up at this information. "Back Sunday night." "Well, have a wonderful time," Lisa said, already typing something on her phone, undoubtedly alerting the rest of the family that Maya's yard would be available. What Lisa didn't know was that Maya would only be driving around the block, then slipping into her neighbor Ellen's house, whose second-floor guest bedroom had a perfect view of Maya's backyard. Everything was ready. All they needed now were the trespassers. As predicted, the Hendersons didn't waste any time. Maya had barely settled into Ellen's guest bedroom when the first guests arrived. Through the window, she watched Lisa and Craig Henderson stroll through the gap in the fence, carrying coolers and bags of supplies, moving with the confidence of people who believed they had every right to be there. "Unbelievable," Ellen muttered, handing Maya a glass of wine. "They really think they own your yard." Maya checked the monitoring app on her tablet. All systems were ready, not for long. Within 30 minutes, the Henderson twins and their friends arrived, followed by two more couples. Apparently, the Hendersons had invited friends to join their unauthorized backyard takeover. Maya watched as they made themselves completely at home, setting up food on her outdoor table, connecting to her Bluetooth speakers, even opening her storage chest to pull out her expensive cushions and throws. "They found my good wine," Maya exclaimed as Craig Henderson emerged from her gazebo with a bottle she'd been saving for a special occasion. "I think that qualifies as breaking and entering," Ellen noted. "Perfect," Maya replied, her finger hovering over the control app. "That means they've officially forfeited any claim to sympathy." Phase 1 began at 7:30 p.m., just as the adults were settling in with their stolen wine, and the teenagers were setting up what appeared to be a beer pong table near her precious koi pond. With a tap on her tablet, Maya activated the custom irrigation system Ben had helped modify. The surprised shrieks were immensely satisfying as strategically placed sprinklers suddenly erupted, not from the ground as one might expect, but from various hidden locations, behind statues, within planters, even from the pergola overhead. The sprinklers delivered precisely targeted streams of water, drenching the intruders, while miraculously sparing Maya's more delicate plants and electronics. "What the hell?" Craig's voice carried clearly through the open window as he frantically tried to shield the wine and food. "Must be on a timer," someone suggested, as the adults scrambled for cover. Maya kept the sprinklers running for exactly 60 seconds, long enough to thoroughly soak everyone, but short enough that they might convince themselves it was just unfortunate timing. She watched with satisfaction as they nervously regrouped, casting suspicious glances around the yard. "Should we just go?" one of the guests suggested, wringing water from her shirt. "It's fine," Lisa Henderson insisted, though her voice lacked conviction. "It was just the automatic sprinklers. They're done now." The group cautiously settled back in, though with noticeably less enthusiasm. Perfect. Phase 1 had created exactly the sense of unease Ben had suggested. Now it was time for Phase 2. 30 minutes later, just as the group had nearly convinced themselves the sprinkler incident was a fluke, Maya tapped her tablet again. This time, the yard's ambient lighting began to pulse rhythmically, while hidden speakers activated with a pre-recorded message in Ben's perfect imitation of a resort announcement system. Attention unauthorized users. This is a notification that you are currently trespassing on private property. Resort security has been dispatched. Please gather your belongings and exit through the designated area. The stunned expressions on the Hendersons' faces were priceless. The teenagers froze mid-game while the adults exchanged panicked glances. "It's just a recording," Craig finally announced, though his voice lacked conviction. "Maya probably set it on a timer before she left. Ignore it." But the damage was done. The party atmosphere had evaporated, replaced by nervous glances and hushed conversations. Some of the guests were already gathering their things, clearly uncomfortable. "Told you this was a bad idea," one of the men muttered to Craig. "What if she calls the cops?" "She's out of town," Craig insisted. "And even if she has cameras, so what? We're just using her yard. It's not like we're stealing anything." "Except the wine," Maya thought wryly, watching the bottle Craig had helped himself to. Phase 3 began when the remaining guests, apparently deciding to brazenly continue their trespassing, attempted to reassert their good time. Zach Henderson and his friends approached the koi pond, clearly planning something that would endanger Maya's precious fish. As they reached the edge, motion sensors triggered Maya's favorite addition. The water suddenly illuminated with a bright blue glow, revealing a harmless but startling water-soluble dye. "Wow!" Zach exclaimed, dipping his hand in the water. "It's glowing." The teenagers, being teenagers, found this fascinating rather than alarming. Within minutes, several had their hands in the water, marveling at the electric blue color now staining their skin. What they didn't know was that this particular dye was a special theatrical formula Ben had sourced from his events company, completely safe but designed to remain visible under regular light for approximately 48 hours. No amount of scrubbing would remove it before Monday morning's classes. "Mom," Allie Henderson called out, holding up glowing blue hands. "Look at this." Lisa Henderson's horror was evident even from Ellen's window. "What is that? Is it toxic?" she demanded, rushing over to examine her daughter's hands. "It's just glowing," one of the boys said, "like a glow stick but cooler." Several of the adults unwisely touched the water themselves before Lisa thought to check her phone. "Oh my God," she gasped, clearly reading something alarming. "Guys, I just got an alert. The neighborhood security patrol is doing rounds tonight." This wasn't true, of course. The alert was a timed text message from Ben's burner phone, but the effect was instantaneous. Panic erupted as the trespassers scrambled to gather their belongings. And that's when Phase 4 began. The exit strategy. As the Hendersons and their friends hurried to leave, they discovered that the gate they'd entered through wouldn't open from the inside anymore. Ben had installed a one-way latch earlier that day. Their only exit was through the side path that led directly past the front of Maya's house, across her front yard, and onto the main sidewalk, in full view of the entire neighborhood. 15 people with bright blue hands, soaking wet clothes and guilty expressions, forced to parade past Maya's security cameras and motion-activated front lights that illuminated them like performers on a stage. Maya could hardly contain her laughter as she watched them emerge, one by one, into the glaring spotlight. But the coup de grace was waiting at the sidewalk. Ellen's husband James, a recently retired police officer, just happening to be walking his dog exactly as the bedraggled trespassers emerged onto the public sidewalk. "Evening, folks," James called out cheerfully, his police academy t-shirt clearly visible under the streetlight. Everything all right over at Maya's place? I'm watching her property while she's away. The look of absolute mortification on Lisa Henderson's face as she tried to explain why 15 people with bright blue hands were streaming out of her absent neighbor's yard was sweeter than any revenge Maya could have imagined. We thought. Lisa stammered. She said we could use it. Craig cut in quickly. While she's away. James raised a skeptical eyebrow, taking in their wet clothes and glowing hands. Really? That's interesting, because Maya specifically asked me to keep an eye out for trespassers. Should I call her, or would you prefer I call my former colleagues at the station? The Hendersons' retreat was so hasty, they left behind one of their coolers, the one containing several bottles of Maya's wine. As James collected the evidence and the last trespasser scurried away, Maya and Ellen clinked their wine glasses in victory. Operation Resort Rules had delivered the perfect vacation experience, just not the one the Hendersons had expected. Morning light streamed through Ellen's guest room window as Maya stirred, momentarily confused by her surroundings before the events of last night came flooding back. She reached for her phone, checking the security feed. Her yard looked peaceful, undisturbed since the hasty retreat of the Hendersons and their friends. Breakfast? Ellen called from downstairs. James is making his famous pancakes to celebrate the success of Operation Resort Rules. Over breakfast, the three of them reviewed the security footage, each replay of the Hendersons' panicked exit, prompting fresh laughter. The question is, James mused, sipping his coffee, did they learn their lesson, or will they try again? Maya considered this. I think Phase 5 will determine that. Phase 5 wasn't technological like the others. Phase 5 was psychological. The art of letting consequences unfold naturally, of watching as actions revealed their full repercussions. A strategy that required patience, but delivered the most lasting impact. Maya drove home mid-morning, timing her arrival to coincide with the neighborhood's peak Sunday activity hours. As she pulled into her driveway, she made sure to wave cheerfully to everyone out walking their dogs or tending their gardens. Nothing to see here. Just a homeowner returning from a weekend away, completely unaware of any drama that might have unfolded in her absence. She chuckled inside. The Henderson house was conspicuously quiet, blinds drawn tight against the morning light. Were they hiding, planning their next move? Or perhaps, just perhaps reconsidering their entitled behavior? The answer came sooner than expected. As Maya inspected her yard, cataloging the minimal damage, her wine collection being the biggest casualty, a hesitant knock sounded at her front door. She opened it to find Zach Henderson, the teenage son, hands still faintly blue despite obvious attempts at scrubbing, eyes fixed firmly on the ground. Mrs. Chen? He stammered, then thrust forward a small box. This is for you. It's an apology for using your yard without permission. Maya accepted the box, noting the Hendersons watching anxiously from their front porch across the street. Inside was a gift card to a local garden center with a handwritten note, "We're sorry for trespassing. It won't happen again." Have you ever witnessed someone truly contrite, not just sorry they got caught, but genuinely remorseful? The posture changes. The voice quiets. The eyes show understanding rather than calculation. That's what Maya saw in young Zach Henderson. And don't forget to subscribe if you're enjoying this story. Thank you, Zach, she said evenly. I appreciate this gesture, but I'd like to speak with your parents as well. The boy nodded, clearly relieved that Maya wasn't yelling. They said they'd like to talk too, whenever you're ready. Phase 5 was unfolding perfectly. That evening, the entire Henderson family, Craig, Lisa, and both teenagers, gathered awkwardly in Maya's living room. Their hands still carried a faint blue tinge, a perfect reminder of consequences that couldn't be washed away with simple apologies. We owe you a sincere apology, Craig began, humility replacing his previous entitlement. What we did was wrong, Trespassing, using your property without permission, bringing others here. There's no excuse. Lisa nodded, adding, "We've spoken with our friends. Everyone knows what happened was inappropriate and won't be repeated." "The blue dye," Ally asked hesitantly. "Will it fade eventually?" Maya exchanged a glance with Ben, who joined them for moral support. "It's non-toxic and temporary," he assured them, "designed to fade completely within a week. Though I'm guessing you've all learned the expression caught blue-handed has new meaning now," Maya added, allowing a small smile. What followed was a genuine conversation about boundaries, respect, and community. The Hendersons explained that they'd moved from an area where common spaces were shared more freely, but acknowledged that didn't excuse their behavior. Maya explained what her garden meant to her, not just property, but a creative expression, a sanctuary, the culmination of years of expertise and effort. "I'd be happy to help you design something for your yard," Maya offered, extending an olive branch, "something that reflects your family's personality." Craig looked genuinely surprised. "After everything we did, you'd help us?" "Good neighbors find ways to move forward," Maya replied, "but only if boundaries are respected." The following weekend, Maya noticed something unexpected. The Hendersons working in their own backyard, pulling weeds, planting flowers, even installing a modest fire pit. When she walked by, they waved, showing her their plans. A simple but thoughtful layout that would give their teenagers and friends a place to gather. Isn't revenge sweeter when it results not just in victory, but in actual change? When it transforms adversaries into allies? When it creates understanding rather than just compliance? Tell us your thoughts in the comments below, and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. Within a month, the neighborhood dynamic had shifted noticeably. The Hendersons hosted a proper backyard barbecue in their own yard. Maya attended, bringing a thoughtfully selected plant as a housewarming gift. There were jokes about blue hands and surprise sprinklers. Tension dissolved into good-natured ribbing. The final piece fell into place when Maya overheard Craig addressing a new family that had moved onto the block. "Make sure you ask before using anybody's yard," he explained. "We learned that lesson the hard way." His blue-stained hands had faded, but the lesson clearly hadn't. Sometimes the most effective boundaries aren't built with fences, but with understanding. Sometimes the most memorable lessons come not from confrontation, but from cleverly orchestrated consequences. And sometimes, just sometimes, what begins with trespassing ends with newfound respect, an unforgettable vacation that changes not just behaviors, but perspectives. Maya's sanctuary remained hers alone, to share only by invitation. The Hendersons transformed their own yard into a gathering place that reflected their family's needs. And throughout the neighborhood, a new awareness spread. Boundaries matter, consent matters, and creativity combined with strategy trumps entitlement every time. What would you do if someone treated your hard-won sanctuary like public property? Let us know in the comments below. Also, remember to subscribe now to the channel if you believe trespassing should not be condoned, much less one of entitlement. The true art of revenge isn't found in escalation, it's found in resolution. In consequences that change mindsets, rather than merely punishing actions. In the delicate balance between standing firm and extending grace once understanding has been achieved. After all, the most satisfying ending isn't watching trespassers retreat in shame. It's watching them build something of their own, respecting boundaries they once violated, transformed by a lesson they'll never forget. Subscribe for more stories like this.